When we look at population change, whether it's in ecosystems or human population, there are four things that we have to take into account. We look at those that are being added to the population, either because they are born or they migrate in. And we look at those that are leaving the population, either they die or they migrate out. So the equation that we use to determine is birth plus immigration, so all those that you're adding, minus all those that you're taking away, deaths and emigration. Now, if those that you're adding equals those you are taking away, then you experience zero population growth. You'll see it abbreviated ZPG, and that's when your births and immigration is equal to your deaths and emigration. One of the things that we will be calculating is crude birth and crude death rate. Anytime you see the word crude, that means per 1,000 people. So how many births occurred per 1,000 people of the population, or deaths. So in the U.S., our crude birth rate is about 13.88, and our death rate is about 8.38. When we look at world population, when we're calculating population change, it's birth rate minus death rate divided by 1,000 people, because once again we're looking at crude, and then to get that a percentage you multiply by 100. Now with world population, we don't have to take into account migration, because people, it's not like we have aliens landing on Earth that we're adding to our population, and we're not sending people to other planets at this point in time. So our average annual population growth rate worldwide is about 1.2%. In the U.S. it's 0.963, so we're not growing as quickly. Our current world population is about 7.2 billion. The majority of people, well, 37% of the world's population are in China and India. China is the most populous country with about 1.3 billion people. India has about 1.2. We are actually the third highest in terms of population, even though we only have 4.5% of the world's population. We have over 300 million people. Now, this map is an interesting way to look at population. It takes the normal size of the country and then either shrinks it or blows it up according to the number of people. So if you look at this, you can see how India and China have been blown up, whereas Australia, Greenland have shrunk, Russia. But look at Japan. Japan is in the top 10 list of most populous countries. It's actually number 10, so it's been blown up as well. It's much larger. The islands of Indonesia are much larger. And you probably notice a few other countries that are either smaller or larger based on their population. All right, we talked a little bit in class about replacement level fertility. There's two types of global fertility rates, replacement being the first one, but that's the number of children a couple must have to replace themselves. So in developed countries, it's 2.1. In developing, it's a little bit higher. It's 2.5. It's going to be greater than 2 because not all of the children are going to reach reproductive age. You're going to have a higher infant mortality rate in developing countries than you are in developed, which is why their replacement level is a little bit higher. Now, after a country reaches replacement level fertility, you're still going to have a population growth for a few years because those that were already born are just starting to reach their childbearing years, and that's called population momentum. Now, the second type of global fertility rate is total fertility rate. That's what we use to project future population change, but that's the average number of children that a woman will have during her childbearing years. And in 2000, in the world, it was about 2.9, and you can see developed countries was 1.3, so even lower than replacement level fertility, whereas developing countries was much higher. The U.S. was 2.1, so we were right at replacement level fertility. The last census was taken in 2010, so the 2011 data, the world total fertility rate was 2.46. So we have brought that down a bit, which is good. So hopefully we'll continue to see that drop and see our population growth level out. So looking at total fertility rate from 2000 to the present, you can see how it has dropped, and if the trend continues and continues to fall, then we should see our population stop growing as quickly as it has. Now, of all the developed or industrialized countries, we here in the U.S. do have the highest fertility rate and the highest immigration rate. We have about 1.66 million more births than deaths, but we also have 800,000 legal immigrants and 300,000 illegal immigrants. But the problem is we have a higher per capita or higher per person rate of resource use, so each addition to our population has much more of an environmental impact to the addition of someone to another country's population. When we look at projected growth for the U.S., it's projected for us to have 392 million people by 2050. And that's more than a 50% increase from 1990. Some of the reasons, a large number of the baby boom women are still in childbearing years, and we saw that pattern when we looked at our class age structure diagrams. We are starting to see an increase in the number of unmarried mothers, and that does include teenage pregnancies. And continued higher fertility rates for some women in certain racial or ethnic groups. We look at certain religions tend to have more children, or certain ethnic groups it's culturally acceptable to have more children. And once again, we have high levels of legal and illegal immigrants, which accounts for a large part of our population growth. Some other factors that affect birth and fertility rates. The first one is the average level of education and affluence. The more industrialized and affluent a country is, the more educated its women are, and they tend to have jobs. In developing countries, children are still seen as an important part of the labor force, so they may have more children to provide that labor. Urbanization, as people move to urban areas, they have fewer children. And as the cost of raising and educating children continues to rise, like the cost of college, then you're going to see families have fewer children. As women have more educational employment opportunities, they're having less children. When infant mortality rates drop, the number of children women have drops as well. Now that might seem backwards, but we'll look at something called demographic transition that explains why that happens. Average age of marriage can affect fertility rates. If your women are getting married at a later age, then they're going to have children later and have fewer children. We talked a little bit about Social Security and how if you have a workforce to support those that are retired, but also if your employer has a pension system or a retirement system. Availability of legal abortions can affect birth and fertility rates and reliable methods of birth control. And with that comes family planning and education of birth control. Religious beliefs, traditions, culture affects the number of births a woman has. We also have factors that affect death rates. We have seen a decline in our crude death rate because people are living longer. As healthcare improves, we're seeing people living to older ages. So the two indicators of overall health of an area, the number one is life expectancy, which is the average number of years a newborn can expect to live. In developed countries, that's about 75. For women, it's a little bit older. In developing countries, it's 64. In the U.S., in 2011, the last time data was taken, the life expectancy was 78.37. Compared to Angola, which is an African country, it's 38.76. Now, that does not mean the average person dies when they're in their 30s. Remember, this is an average. They could have a high infant mortality rate, and that would make that average come down. Or if you have an area that has a lot of warfare. The infant mortality rate, once again, is out of 1,000. It's the number of babies out of every 1,000 that die in that first year of life. This is probably the single most important measure of a society's quality of life because it indicates what type of nutrition and health care is present. If you look at the map here at the bottom, with the infant mortality rates. The countries in blue and green have a much lower infant mortality rate, and those in orange and red are higher. So you can see a lot of the African countries have a high infant mortality rate, and that's probably why Angola's life expectancy is so low. In the U.S., our infant mortality rate is about 6 deaths per 1,000. Some reasons they're high is that we still have women in poverty that have inadequate health care. We have pregnant women that are addicted to drugs, and their children have a lower birth rate. Teenagers also tend to have babies that have a low birth weight, and this tends to be the most important factor in infant deaths. The U.S., of the industrialized countries, we have the highest teenage pregnancy rate. That doesn't mean the highest teenage pregnancy rate of any country, just those that are industrialized.